Welcome to the Design Zone. Episode 1. Numero uno.
First one.
It's been a long time coming. Not that long. Not that long. Hey, so this is a podcast all about the game design of League of Legends. Each show, we have an open discussion centered on a primary topic. We're junior designers, junior game designers, and we've played League for a while, and we feel like we have something to add to the conversation. So my name is Dylan Rader.
My name is Robert Bauerle.
And we are the hosts of the Design Zone League of Legends podcast. We should go into a little bit of our history with League. And you've been playing the longest, so you should go into it first.
Yeah, I've been playing League since the release of Miss Fortune, which was sometime around 2009, 2010, late 2009, early 2010, in Season 1. And I've been playing pretty actively since then, so I've been around for a while. Over the last 2 years, I haven't been so active, but I'm just getting into it a little bit more again. Main role. Currently, I main top, but I've pretty much played a little bit of everything over the years. You know, I had my mid lane phase, AD carry phase.
Yeah, I mean, you've been around the block a lot more than I have. A lot more than I have. I mean, because you didn't just play the other roles, like you mained.
Yeah,
basically
I mained for
every
like
role.
a season, if not 2.
Wow.
Yeah,
because you've had 10 seats. It's been 10 years now. Mm-hmm. Probably 9 years for you. You probably came in season 2-ish.
Season 1.
Season 1. Yeah. So you've been here. You came in that first season.
Mm-hmm.
So if we count that, 10 years.
Yep.
Yeah, that's 2 years for every role. I don't know if you knew this or not, but there's 5 champions on a team in League. It's 5v5.
Yeah, I knew that, as a matter of fact. It's not just me, even though I like to think it is sometimes. Or it feels like it is sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mained basically only top. I've only really mained top, with a sort of secondary main jungle. I often was able to take a lot of my top picks into jungle, and the reason I was so specifically focused for so long is because I didn't get started in the game the way a lot of people did. I didn't find the game and it was like, okay, this is interesting, let me download it and play it. And I didn't even really have a friend who was like, hey, you should play this. There was a club that was starting at my high school. It was an esports club. And I heard about that and I was like, oh my gosh, there's other kids who like video games like me? So I heard about it.
Exactly what we all sound like.
Yeah, well, it's funny. So it was in the 10th grade. Okay, so I probably didn't sound like that. But I went to the meeting and they were like, we're going to play League of Legends. So I downloaded it and started playing it with the presidents who were founding it, with the goal of, the idea of being part of a high school esports team. So from the beginning...
And this was in season 5?
5, yes, yeah. So I started out around season 5 when they came out with the new map. So my first 10 or 20 or so games were in the old map. It was before preseason began for season 5. Then preseason hit, they dropped the new map, and that's when I really started to get into it.
The earliest memory of League, as we all know.
Yeah, I barely remember the old map because I barely played on it before I came in right when that new map came out. And I'm fine with that. The new map looks really good. It
does look,
looks a lot better. Cool. The also spatially, the spacing of things just feels a lot more level design wise.
Yeah, it actually looks like a piece of terrain rather than just
Well, visually, but also I think that they really honed in on the spacing between walls and stuff like that as well.
I remember the first time I saw the animation of the dragon at the top of the map in top
Yeah.
lane. Did you ever see it? That was
Yeah,
cool
because
when
I was top lane, so I saw that and I was like, guys, and I was pinging up at the top, and they're like, holy
the dragon's
shit.
flying around. Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Fun times.
But yeah, so from the beginning, I was playing it at League from with a competitive mindset, and obviously I was a noob. I wasn't super good at the game, but the goal was to get good enough to be able to compete with other high schoolers, and be part of my high school esports team, and all of that jazz. So I think I had a different experience than a lot of people.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
But
it's definitely not how people normally start.
Yeah, and so and it didn't really. I don't think it was that different than if you played any high school sports. If anybody played any competitive sports, I mean, we had practice sessions, we had team meetings, we talked about strategy, and we went up against other high schools like every week. There was basically a tournament. That was that much to it. But back specifically to my timing of League, I played League for probably 2.5 years ish. Let's say 3 years. The last 3 years of high school.
Gotcha.
And then when I went off to college, I basically stopped playing, and I didn't play just like you. I just realized that because you just said this, for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a 2-year break, and you had about a 2-year break. I think both of us basically when we went to college.
Yep.
And we both sort of started to ease back into it around the same time. And
I mean, it's huge for game designers. It's like it's a game that you have to be aware of. Just because it's the biggest esport, and it will probably remain the biggest esport for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it being overtaken by anything anytime soon.
Yeah, so. I don't think Fortnite's going to dethrone League.
I mean, Fortnite's definitely the most popular game, but it can't be the most competitive. It's not built for that.
Yeah, but that's a story for another time.
Correct.
So yeah, and as both of us started to get back into the game, we started to talk about the game together with one another. Mm-hmm. And as game designers, whenever we're talking about a game, inevitably it almost always starts from a player's perspective, and it always ends up in a game designer's perspective. It always goes it always ends up with us breaking down the mechanics, and like we always keeps
delving into.
Yeah, we just keep deeper and deeper until we're like legit.
Why did this happen? Why did they choose to do this? That's
a good
point.
Yeah. What do you think their initial design intent is? And so until eventually we're just having a design discussion as if we're designing for the team, as if we're designing at Riot. And what we found is that we really enjoy talking about League with one another, and we thought that the conversations had enough depth, had enough sort of interest factor.
Yeah. That you guys would be interested in what?
Yeah, or at least that we may document this, and so that's what we mean when we say we feel like we have something to add to the conversation. Should probably just jump into the topic of this episode. So I'm gonna give a little primer, and then we're gonna get into it. So this show is not intended to dismiss the work of the Riot game designers. It's a very difficult thing to develop a game, and we just like to talk about our perspective on it all. We're here to have an analytical discussion about a very complex game, its mechanics, systems, and balancing. Our topic of the day is turret plating. Turret plating. So we should get into a description, basically, of what turret plating is, just to sort of lay the foundation for the discussion. For anybody who doesn't fully understand turret plating, I'll let you take this.
So I'm sure if you've played a game of League of Legends
recently, within the last season,
within the last year, you've seen it. The outer turrets start the game. If you look at them, they have 5 health bars. Now each of those bars is one turret plate. They each have 1,000 health. That's just the turret health split into 5 portions. And they just basically make the turret harder to kill. So
yeah, and the biggest goal is just so that first 14 minutes of the game, the turrets are just harder to kill. They're buffed effectively, and they get harder to kill as you attack them.
For each plate you destroy, the turret gets bonus armor and magic resistance, and it gets additional armor and magic resistance as soon as you destroy one, until you essentially leave the area. So it's harder to take them in quick succession than it is to take them one at a time by backing off and going back in over and over again.
I actually didn't know that part. That they add, so whenever you break a plate, they not only get stronger innately, because you're at a deeper plate, effectively, on the health bar, but they also get a temporary buff, while you're in combat with it?
If you have additional allies. Yep.
Okay, so if you're on your own, they don't get that temporary buff.
If multiple plates are destroyed within a 20-second window.
Okay, yeah. So normally it's because you have an ally with you. You're busting that tower down really fast.
Yep. They don't want it to go down too fast.
Yeah.
So they give it a little bit of an extra wall there.
So pretty quickly we're seeing that the sort of main goal of these turret platings is to slow down the turret being destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want, yeah.
But that's not all that happens. There's in my personal opinion, the most important part of what these turret platings does is that the turret doesn't just get stronger when you destroy a plating, but you get a big heaping whop of gold for every plate that you destroy.
Precisely 120 gold per plate, for a total of 600 gold if you destroy all 5 before 14 minutes when the turret plating falls off.
Yeah, and that is what, like a couple of kills? 3 kills?
2 champion kills. If the kills remain at 300 gold each. Obviously there's other factors that can change it, but on average 2 champion kills, yep. And that's excluding the turret First Blood, which totals 1,000 if you get the First Blood turret and the turret kill gold yourself. So you can get up to 1,000 gold for killing a full-plated turret before 14 minutes.
Yeah, so I think my personal experience, because these have only been here for a year. They came in the very first patch of preseason for season 9 2019.
Which was in November 2018.
Yeah. So that was the first patch that came out was patch 8.23. Like you said, it was November 20th of 2018. It was that first patch of preseason, and that was within the period that I wasn't really playing.
Correct.
And so when I came back in, they were a thing and had already been a thing, and
I witnessed them coming on. Because of the preseason hit, I decided to at least look at where the game was at the time. I played a couple games in preseason, but I didn't get into it at that point. But I at least experienced how it was when it first came around.
And what I found as I was playing is before I was even talking to you, before I was even talking to anybody else about their thoughts about it, I was very questionable about them.
Skeptical.
Very skeptical, yeah. Because, I didn't understand... Of course, I'm just skeptical of change anyways, right? But as... It was the gold that sort of made me feel weird about it very quickly. And you convinced me pretty quickly once we started talking that it is a massive positive feedback loop. Yep. And a positive feedback loop is, for anybody who doesn't know, is just basically the rich get richer.
Yep. Then the poor get poorer.
Yeah. And that is the summarization of a positive feedback loop. And within a game, that basically means the person who is winning normally gets more ahead due to that specific mechanic that is a positive feedback loop.
Yep.
And therefore, a negative feedback loop is the rich get poorer.
And the poor get richer.
And
for example, the bounty system.
Yes.
Yep.
Because the more kills somebody gets, they're getting more ahead because they're getting more kills. But the enemy team, the people that they are killing and getting ahead of, they get the opportunity to get an influx of gold to basically catch up a little bit if they manage to kill them.
To come back, yeah. And there's also a negative feedback loop in place where if you are dying over and over again, the person who kills you gets even less gold. So there's that as well. That one's much smaller than the bounty system, but it's still there. So there are some negative feedback loops here and there that are hidden under some smoke and mirrors.
And I mean, so when you came in preseason, you came in immediately then.
Yeah,
and you played some games.
I played a few games on the preseason patch, and I didn't really understand it back then either because people weren't playing around it yet. If that makes sense, they knew it was there. Maybe they didn't even know it was there, right? So they were playing League as they had before, and people didn't really understand that you could take advantage of the gold that it gave. And by the way, some turret plates when they came out for a very long time until a couple weeks ago in patch 9.23, they gave 160 gold per plate, not 120. So you could get, I think it was 1,380 gold or something. No, yeah, you could get a lot more gold for killing all of the plates rather than just 1,000. So it was an even bigger positive feedback loop back then. And yeah, it just kind of... It really turned me off to the game at that point. And I came back later, but I didn't like the turret plating change at first. It took me a while to realize what it was that I didn't like about the preseason at that time. And they've made some changes to help with that, but
yeah. So I think the logical next step is when you look at a game and you see a single piece of it that bothers you or feel like, oh, this could have been done better, the first thing you need to do is try to figure out what the designer's intent was. And that is the root of understanding, I mean, obviously, why they did it, but it just helps you. That's the sort of beginning of this conversation. And luckily, Riot does a pretty good job at releasing patch notes, and for most big changes, other than small number tweaks, they give a little blurb for a designer's intent.
Yep, they tell you why they did what they did.
And so I'm going to read exactly what they wrote for turret plating in 8.23.
The original patch that it was released in.
The gist here is that turrets won't fall over at 5 minutes when the enemy team groups up and hard pushes your lane. Instead, as they chip your turret down, they'll get some extra gold to reward their aggression, while your turret becomes increasingly harder to kill. It's a win-win. Lane bullies get more turret gold than before, while late scaling champs have a more reliable window to safely farm under turret. This also means your lane won't be decided as heavily by the success or failure of other lanes, since their own turrets are harder to take too. The fall-off mechanic ensures lane phases won't be too much longer on average and makes plating gold a true advantage for early game champs, since once it's gone, it's gone. So the idea of protecting late game champions, I couldn't agree more with.
Yeah.
I think that the game needed that, and I like that aspect of turret platings.
I do.
I want to clarify, I don't think that the idea of turret platings is bad.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, it was definitely a good idea. And I think that it actually achieved its goal fairly well. It did its job, but there were some downsides, obviously.
Yeah, because, I mean, I remember this problem that they're basically fixing, which is when I would do bad in a game, especially if we were in a competitive match versus another high school, and they had all plat, or we would go up against a team that's like all diamond, and we're just all like gold, and they're just wiping the floor with us. And so if I just got annihilated top lane, my turret would be down, and that would just that'd screw me even worse.
It's very hard to apply any pressure on the map when you can't really leave your inner turret, right? Because you can't go into the jungle because that's their territory now. You don't have that turret to run to, which is what usually keeps it as your territory. So it just, it was just a worse positive feedback loop. Yeah, and I think turret plating is.
And I always played late scaling champs as well, and so I would get pushed in, and this is exactly what they're describing, right? So they're aware of that happening. If you do bad in a lane, then you do even worse in the lane because they destroy the turret, and then you're hyper screwed, and that's that positive feedback loop. So The turret platings at their root are supposed to be a negative feedback loop, right? Or at least it looks like that was the main intent from what they said.
Yeah, at least more so than they were before, because it still needed to have a positive feedback loop in it to benefit the early game champions, which they mentioned.
Yeah, and so I mean let's look over this again. So we have lane bullies get more turret gold than before, while late scaling champs have a more reliable window to safely farm under turret. Yeah, I think my main thing with the turret plating is, I mean, we can just start getting into basically. So you mentioned you came in when they were first out, and people
Correct.
weren't really understanding.
Yeah, they didn't know that you could like take advantage of that yet.
Yes. So it. What did people start doing to take advantage or to exploit the fact that you get extra gold?
Yeah, so
how would you define what everybody started doing and how it affected the game?
The first thing that I noticed is that junglers started to be able to abuse it, specifically early game junglers. So if you had like an early game, you didn't even need an early game top laner. If you had a mid to early game top laner, just a champion that could at least function in the early game, and an early game jungler, they could gank top lane very early on into the lane. And even if they didn't kill the lane opponent, they would essentially force the enemy laner to back off to a certain extent. So because the threat of death, even under tower, like it was still too much. Like you couldn't risk getting under tower. The only thing you could do is stand to get experience. And what junglers would do is they would gank even if it was in a bad position, and they would shove in the wave towards the other team's turret, and the top laner, if the top laner died, they would still just whack down that turret and get maybe 1 or 2 plates. And then even if the top laner didn't die, they could still sit there and just whack down the plates, and the other top laner, because of the pressure from both the kill pressure from the jungler and the other top laner, they couldn't really do much to stop them from getting the turret plates, and they would just end up getting them anyway. And that because the jungler just gets that free gold, they don't really get punished for doing that gank, and then they go back into the jungle, clear a couple camps, maybe they gank another lane, and they can just run back top lane because there are still turret plates. You have 14 minutes to take advantage of this, and it just allows you to gank much more often. And as long as you can get to a turret plating, you don't lose any gold for that. And because you're helping the top laner push in the wave, you still get that experience as well. So, to sum that all up, because I know I just went into a lot there, it basically helped early game junglers a lot. And the late game junglers, on the other hand, couldn't really take advantage of that because they didn't have the same kill pressure that the early game junglers did. If you get ganked by a Lee Sin or an Elise, against in your lane there is like a Tryndamere, a Garen, or Darius, right? Like those two champions have enough damage to kill pretty much any champion under tower, and especially champions that are good at diving, like Elise and Lee Sin, because they don't have to worry about dying to the tower as much. They could just fully take advantage of pressuring the other player away, and they wouldn't get punished by losing the experience that the late game junglers are only farming, because they get it back from the turret.
Yeah, and so what I've sort of come to in my head now is that, so what they tried to do here was they tried to add a big negative feedback loop to help protect the sort of the snowballiness that early game can present.
Correct.
Right.
And for the most part, it succeeded in doing that.
And they tried to balance it, so they have a negative feedback loop, and they tried to balance it with a positive feedback loop built into it. My main thinking is that I think that was probably good thinking, right? However, I think that the positive feedback loop was unfortunately weighed much stronger than the negative feedback loop. So
Mm-hmm.
the late game champion getting to farm safely under their turret for longer was just it ended up, I think, just being worth a lot less than the gold that the enemy team would get.
Yeah,
because
it was weighted wrong.
Because gold is like gold is really important. It's the most important resource in League of Legends, and basically what this equates to is the defending champion, because in this scenario you have somebody who's pushing really hard.
Correct.
You have the defending champion and you have the offensive, the offending champion.
Yep.
The defending champion gets more time, right? But the offending champion gets more gold, immediate gold reward, which becomes more items. They're already on the offensive. They get more gold, they get more items, which let them kill those turret plates more and get more immediate reward. And so I think that it made it even better than it was before for those early game aggressive champions, because they got a reward that they never had before. Destroying the turret was already a massive reward. Pressuring the enemy laner was already, I think, enough of a reward, because you're decreasing their ability to farm. You're probably freezing the lane. You're doing things. You're applying pressure to them. You're doing damage to their turret. You're getting a lot out of that game-wide. Now, they add turret plating. For the aggressive player, all that's really changed is they get gold for doing it now, right? And it's harder to destroy the turret, but basically all they gave up was the turret is destroyed later in the game. Still gets destroyed, but they get a lot of gold for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely simplified the laning ideology too. Like before, you like kind of had some options, but now you don't really have options because the turret's almost certainly going to be there because of how difficult it is to take. So instead of roaming, even though that is an option for some champions because they have ways to roam, you almost always just keep shoving in that turret until 14 minutes passes and it inevitably falls very quickly, or you end up taking it with enough pressure because you get ahead enough. And then you start roaming after that.
Yeah, and
so it put a time limit on the laning phase.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, because before the whole idea of laning phase and stuff was fluid, and it would kind of shift with meta, or I think specifically with team comp. And that's a good point with and just like they said here, right? They said it's a true advantage for early game champs, since once it's gone, it's gone. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that is that a resource that a player is going to lose access to immediately becomes much more urgent that they deal with it then. And so now it's sort of forced players into let's say an offensive player wants, they want to be offensive, but they don't want to be offensive in their lane, right? Maybe they're in a matchup that it's going to be tough anyways, but they want to roam. Right, they want to roam early. That's already a risk. That's a huge risk for XP, okay? And that's a big risk for gold as well. You're missing XP. You're probably missing farm for roaming unless you do it very carefully. And
if they roam, the enemy laner gets to shove in and they get to take some of those turret plates for free.
Well, I'm saying before
Yeah.
turret plates. Right? So before turret plates, they're already taking a big risk, and they're risking their life, because if they don't do it right, they could give up a kill to the enemy team. And but unfortunately, like now it's they have to risk all of that if they want to roam, as well as give up free money, effectively, right?
Giving up free money.
Free real estate. And there's no reason to do that. And so I think it simplified the meta in a way that wasn't really necessary. And I think
it made the best option, like the clear option. Like the clear option is the best option. There's just very, very little reason to do anything other than that. And it almost made the gameplay a little stale in that way as well. Just because that's like pretty much the the main strategy for most of the meta top laners, so to speak. They all kind of try to take advantage of that right now. And not just for top lane, sorry. Like, pretty much every lane tries to do that.
So you know what I've picked up on through this conversation, though, is the aspect that it goes away. Because as I was describing before, what the offensive player is getting is they're getting money that they just weren't getting before. Mm-hmm. They're getting just free money added on to the other benefits of having an oppressive early game. Mm-hmm. And here is, I think, a real big crux of the problem, is the fall off.
Yeah.
The 14-minute fall off. Because what this means is the offensive player gets the advantages, not as many advantages as they did before, right? They don't get the turret destruction as early. Correct. They lose that. But they gain a lot of gold, and they still gain all the other advantages of you're pressuring this person, they're probably losing farm, all that nonsense. Mm-hmm. They have all that and additional gold. And you know what the defending player gets?
Nothing.
Nada. They get to farm under turret, which is harder, by the way, and they don't get to ever make up that gold late game, which is what late game skilling champions want to do. They want to slowly catch up over time, and you know what this sort of like a snowbally aggressive early strategy wants anyways. Like if they can get a few kills, that's amazing for them. They want influxes of gold, right? That early influx of gold, the fact that you're getting it before the enemy team is already a massive advantage. It doesn't matter that they could possibly catch up in gold later, because your strategy is to win before like 25 minutes, win before 30 minutes, right?
Yep.
Before late game really starts to set in, and you know that enemy team comp is going to just start swamping the floor with you in team fights.
Yeah, you want to beat them down before they get to that point.
But the thing that sort of comes out of this is that it's like there has to be a phrase for this. It's like a closed loop, basically. They get so this is really why I think I like to call it free money from the turrets, is because
they're still doing the same thing that they were
because
before.
Every other way of getting gold in League is what is it? Symmetrical. Both teams always have the same opportunity, basically, to get that gold back. Let's start with minions. There's always the same amount of minions, always launching at the same time. So if you do poorly in farm, the minions are just going to keep coming. You can keep farming them, keep getting gold. Same with monsters, they respawn. Same with kills, players respawn. So if you are giving up a lot of kills early game, you can start getting kills later game and catch up in that gold that you got. The gold from kills. The problem is that gold from turret plating disappears. The option to get it.
There's no way to get it back, and it doesn't add towards a player's bounty either.
Yeah, the option to get it disappears.
Imagine if it added towards the player's bounty. Now that I've said that. Imagine if it was like kills. Like there was not all of it back, but you could get some of it back if you managed to kill them. Because CS can do that. If you're down in kills, like you've died 3 times in a row. I'll give Singed as an example, because Singed players kind of farm sometimes and just feed. That's like a strategy. But if you're down like, if you're 0-4-0, right? You've died 4 times. You haven't killed anybody. But you have more CS than the average CS of the enemy team. Your gold doesn't decrease. It goes back up to the regular 300 because it acknowledges that you're still getting gold. So if CS can do that,
and what if turret play do that? And so what I think with that also is like that is an immediate payback. So if somebody is sort of taking the risk of playing very aggressively, and they're going to push in and they're going to grab turret plates, then what they're also risking is they're increasing, their bounty. And it would still, I feel like, would be worth it, because just like getting a bunch of kills, totally worth your bounty going up, right?
Yeah.
It's just a fact
you still get way more gold than they get for killing you.
And it's that same thing I was talking about, is that because you have the gold right now and they don't have the gold right now, the time in which you get gold is very important. And so that's why when you get a kill and the enemy team might get gold later if they kill you, right? That is totally fine, because it's not right then, right? Because you get to go back with that gold and get stronger, which makes it even more likely that they're not going to be able to kill you, and that's why it's fun.
And again, it's still not even the same amount of money that you've accumulated from all of those kills. Like, they're only getting a portion of what you got. They're not getting all of it. So you still got your advantage from that. You got your immediate items. You got to make use of those because you got them earlier than your opponents. And they're not even getting all of that gold back if they do kill you. And when they kill you, it resets your gold deficit. If you were 0-6-0 and then you become 1-6-0, you're all of a sudden worth 300 gold again.
You know what I find interesting about? Yeah, we hadn't talked about that before, but that's really interesting. If plates added to your bounty, then I think that's a pretty.
That might be just enough of a little bit of a negative feedback loop to offset this huge positive.
Well, my thought actually is that I think it's actually a big negative feedback loop. And here's why. Because when you get a kill, how should I put this? When somebody's killing a turret plate, they. Well, no, I think it could be balanced so that it's about the same, actually. Because now that I'm thinking about it, it's all about the amount that increases the bounty. So, because, again, gold is really the important part, right? When you kill somebody, their respawn time kind of matters, but that really only matters late game. What it really counts for is...
It can matter a lot early game because of the experience that you can miss out on.
That's a fair point.
If you die in the middle of the lane and then they shove the wave in, you miss out on a wave of experience and gold. And a full wave of minions is about like 150 to 180 gold. So you're missing out on that as well.
Yeah, well, that's a fair point. But I still think... So I think...
Late game it matters for team fights, but that's a completely different story.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. But the gold, I still think, is the most important thing you get from a kill, right? That gets you items, that gets you more powerful. And the amount... They could just scale it based off the amount of gold that you get from the turret, right? And it would still be proportionally, it'd be like the same amount of a negative feedback loop, right? Yeah. The person who is losing gets as much back that the other person would get if they collected a bounty, right?
There's a problem with that though.
Okay.
Because that does. Let's, for example, just because this is what I'm gonna go into. Let's say you're top lane and both top laners kill all 5 turret plates, so they get 1,000. They get 600 extra gold from that. So both top laners are 600 gold above, let's say, mid lane, where neither mid laner killed either of the turret plates, right?
Okay.
So they're both 600 gold above that. Let's also now say that they both kill each other one time, so they get a portion of that turret plate gold. So they get, like, let's say, like, even if it's just like 300 each. so they're both 900 gold up on mid laners now. Now mid laners they both have access to that gold as well. But bounty gold isn't added to the bounty system. If you get bounty gold from someone, that doesn't go into your bounty. So that 900 gold that those people have up there, that's completely gone for the other team forever. So now both top laners are very far ahead from the rest of the game.
Wow.
Right? So that's a problem
that's like we added more money to the system by doing that. That's like you talk about a lane being snowbally, dude.
Another possible suggestion that I wanted to bring up is what if turret plate was just made global, like turret gold used to be? Instead of you getting all 120 of it, like your team gets a total of like 160, right? Like everybody gets like 40 or 30 or whatever the number would balance to be, which would be way less gold for you, but that might matter a lot to the other laners.
Well, that's
if you get a couple plates, that's like 100 gold in their pocket that they can use to finish off an item and a full recall earlier than they may not have been able to.
I like that for a few reasons. One, and this is sort of separate from turret plating, but what it helps is like if one lane is doing bad and another is doing good, like you said, it helps kind of balance that out. Like bot lane's doing bad, right? Or let's say bot lane's doing good. Top lane is doing bad.
And that often happens because of junglers too. Because if one jungler goes top, the other jungler usually ends up going bot, unless they clashed up. But let's assume if one jungler goes top and the other goes bot, the top lane on like red side will probably be ahead, and which means the bot lane on blue side will be ahead. So then the bot lane ends up getting really ahead because they got all the turret plates. That gold's now in their pocket. The other team's top lane's now ahead. They got all the gold. That gold's in their pocket. When you go into team fights, it's then the AD carry versus the top lane because those are the people with all of the gold. And then the other team's AD carry and the other team's top lane aren't really doing much because they don't have that gold. There's no way for them to get that back. They're just permanently just kind of behind a little bit. But if you split that turret plating gold, that means that some of the gold that bot lane got goes to the top laner who's behind, and some of the gold that other top lane got goes to the bot lane who's behind. It splits the gold a little more evenly to prevent that from happening, and I see that happen a lot.
So here's the main thing that I think adds to it, because I do see one negative, and I'll go into that after this.
I also want to note that that's what turrets used to do. Basically, you would get a smaller portion of gold for yourself, and then the team would get like a total of 100 gold each.
So, the reason I think that that's good, specifically for the problems we're talking about, is that the big problem is that the rich get richer, too much richer. The person who gets the kill, they're getting the kill gold. They're getting the lane pressure, and they're getting extra gold from turret, right? And so
it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and well, yeah, and so by spreading it out, you're decreasing the thing that they added in, right?
Yeah.
So they still get the kill and the turret pressure, like before. And they're still getting turret gold, but it's a way of decreasing it a lot for that individual person, because I don't think the problem necessarily is that the enemy team has an average higher gold, which is still the highest indicator of a winning team, right? If they have higher average gold. But I think what really happens most often is that one person who dominates their lane gets all of that gold, gets a ton of that gold.
That's why I think the global gold helps that.
And so they snowball out of control.
You see that 12-0 Aurelia just run into the team fight 3 levels above everybody else and just instantly kill the entire enemy team as like a bruiser off tank. Have you seen that happen?
Yeah. Well, again, and
that's from the turret plate.
And it's from the gold, right? And so that's the and also I think that, so here's the sort of negative that I see about it though, is that so one of the strategies as a team is to be very careful about how you funnel gold into a specific player, right? So the simplest example of this is your ADC and your ADC and support bottom lane. The support wants to make sure that he doesn't last hit the enemy team.
He wants the AD carry to get the gold.
Wants the AD carry to get the gold. So right now, what they can do is that if the jungler comes in, ganks, and they start getting turret plating, the jungler can peel off, or even the top laner can peel off if they want a specific person to get that gold.
They actually made it more difficult to do that. You have to peel off very early because it gives you turret plating gold. If you're within 1200 range of the turret, you get part of that plate gold no matter what. And if you assisted in the plate, I believe in like the last 20 seconds or something, if you auto-attack that turret, and you're within 2,300 range, I think it's around there, you get part of that gold still. So you have to really back off to not get that turret plating gold. So funneling into just one person is, with specifically turret plating, is actually pretty hard.
So I think that also that implies that they don't intend it to be used that way.
Yeah.
And I don't think personally. So this is a negative that I found, a possible negative, but I personally don't find that funneling that gold into a specific player is really.
I don't think that's healthy for non-competitive play as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's not what you want to play against or with when you're playing like even like a normal game or even just like a ranked.
For the huge vast majority of players, I think I can safely say that it is better with the gold sort of spread between people. Now, for competitive play, people might be able to.
There are still ways to funnel for sure.
Yeah, I mean, because funneling might be important for them, but they are. I think they're at such a high skill level and they're doing things so differently already that like. They're going to find a way to exploit the game, basically, no matter what the game state is.
Yeah, always will.
So
it's inevitable.
Yeah. So other than avoiding things that esports players could exploit, I think that balancing for the vast majority of players is definitely the way.
I think that'll just make the game more healthy overall.
So I want to go back to the fact that it falls off. So let's pause on the idea that it adds to a bounty, because that's an interesting idea, but I have a feeling it might be.
I think it adds
an overly
too much
complicated
gold into one lane.
Well, we found out that, but it also I have a feeling that it would end up being quite convoluted of a solution. Or not convoluted because there's already the bounty system, but maybe more convoluted than it needed to be. So. What if they just didn't fall? The reason they originally gave for them not being able to fall is that they didn't want laning phase to last too long. Right?
What if only the armor and magic resistance fell? And then you could just kill them fairly quickly like usual, and you would still get that waiting gold. That brings back the funneling problem, though. Because what if...
all of a sudden you don't need help to kill them.
Bot lane kills their turret, and then 14 minutes pass, they just send their AD carry top lane, and they just get 1,000 gold from a turret in 30 seconds.
Well, I'm thinking about this too. Is I'm thinking about from a team perspective. If your team is doing worse early game, probably because you're against a team that has a good comp early game. They've destroyed your turrets, and now it's like, okay, you're missing 2 outer towers, and you maybe have one of their turrets down to like half health. They still have all of their outer turrets, and that's a big deal. Their front line is pushed up way further than you. What I find is that past that 14-minute mark is like it becomes a lot harder to come back.
Even if you manage to push out and take one of those turrets, it does almost nothing. Like, the majority of their time, they're already pushed into your jungle. So the map pressure that normally gives you is basically irrelevant. And the gold that it gave you is even less relevant. Because turrets give less gold now when they're destroyed. Because of the turret plating.
Yeah, my main concern here is well, I've said it over and over, but it's just the fact that this gold gets created, and there's no way
to get it back.
There's no way to get it back late game, no matter what.
There's no
right, and that was phrased as a true advantage, but I think that the advantage of having the gold before your enemy is already enough. I don't think that the opportunity needs to be taken away from the enemy team. I think we should go into the patches past this initial turret plating patch where they first added it,
It's pretty good.
and sort
Take a
of
look at those.
yeah, and sort of take a look at how they've tried to change it and how they have changed turrets over this last year. So we're in preseason now. It's basically been 1 year since they added turrets on November 20th in patch 8.23. So we can go to the next patch that they basically immediately did. This is still in preseason, I believe.
8.24b.
Yeah, I think so. So what changed here?
So this was a pretty small change. Essentially, in summary, the only thing they did, so turrets originally after turret plating fell, they lost all of their armor and magic resistance. So they went to 0 armor and magic resistance, which just ended up in them being melted.
Mm-hmm.
So all they did was just made turrets have 40 armor and magic resistance after the turret plating fell off, so that they didn't just die instantly. They're still much easier to take without the turret plating than with the turret plating, but it's a little bit harder. Do you want to read off what the devs said to summarize their...
Yeah. Turret plating has done its job of extending lane phase for cases where teams burn down turrets as quickly as possible. In less violent lanes, though, outer turrets fall too easily once plating falls off. They'll now keep the baseline resistance they have at game start, with plating fall off, only removing the extra resistances granted by broken plates. Yeah, so there's not much there. Other than that,
it's a quick micro patch. It was 8.24b, so just following up on some changes from the preseason, basically. Now, 9.20 or 9.1. Sorry, this is the first patch of season 9.
So now we're in season 9. So we're in 9.1. This was in January, and this is turret assists. So this is probably where a lot of those. Yeah, this is where those they did changes related to what you were talking about.
The assist radius. So it's 1200 range. They just slightly increased the proximity radius, where if you're just in the range of the turret, you get some of that plate gold whether you assisted or not. That range is currently 1200. They increased it slightly there, and they also included the assist radius, which is champions within 2,500 range who assisted in a turret takedown. So if they hit that plate a couple times, they get part of that turret gold. So they essentially just made it harder to funnel. I'm sure they'll mention that in their explanation of their thoughts behind these changes.
Yeah, so this is a pretty long explanation for not too many changes. The gist of these changes is that if you helped secure a turret takedown, you should get gold for doing so, even if you're not right next to it. This will cover cases like a jungler going back to clearing, or a low health ally recalling in brush. Funneling local gold into one player, allies will have a back off earlier to create sufficient distance, meaning the beneficiary will be left more vulnerable for a longer window as they try to solo the turret's remaining health. So I think they're definitely in the right here. Mm-hmm. So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier, where... And this makes sense. So, like, if you want to funnel gold into one person, which is normally an optimal strategy, which is why esports players do it all the time.
I'm actually surprised they didn't mention funneling here, and they said that it was for a different reason, which was to essentially allow a strategy to have, like, a jungler, most likely, sitting slightly out of vision range, waiting for the enemy top laner to come stop the enemy from taking a turret plate, and then just lane ganking them after that. I mean, it's interesting, but...
Well, so it says, this will cover cases like a jungler going back to clearing. So I'm going to help a little, and then I'm going to go back farming. That's one of the cases. Yeah. That isn't the strategy where you're basically just camping.
Oh, they did mention farming.
Yeah, and then...
I missed that. Ignore what I said.
Yeah, and so they go in, they continue. While we were adjusting the local gold ranges, we also slightly expanded the existing radius to handle instances where a teammate is posturing to keep enemies from jumping on the player burning the turret down rather than damaging the turret themselves. I don't. I think I misunderstood this. Do you know what they're saying here?
Yeah, this is what I said. So they also said that they expanded this radius to enable the strategy where you can like kind of hide slightly out of vision range. Like if let's say you're a jungler, you're in top lane, you're sitting at the edge of that brush right next to the turret, right? Mm-hmm. And your laner is there whacking on the turret plating, and the enemy top laner runs in, maybe deals some damage to him. They're winning the fight now because they have full health still, and maybe your top laner's at about half or something. He has to run now, because if he fights that, first off, he's under turret range, so you can't do that fight. So he's backing off. The enemy top laner's obviously going to chase because it's a winning fight. You're sitting there as the jungler, just waiting for that enemy top laner to run into this 1v2, and then you take them out. And in which case, you still get some of that gold because you're in the proximity radius when they're taking that plate. If the top laner doesn't try to fight them, or he does get that plate right before that fight starts, you still get some of that gold. That's what I think that they're talking about here.
Yeah, and so I think we can simplify these. I mean, these changes down is to like they're wanting other members of the team. Well, I guess specifically they want members of the team that help take the turret down get extra gold. Mm-hmm. But I mean, what I feel like is the real. I feel like they're kind of getting to what we were talking about.
The funneling.
Well, no, not the funneling, mm-hmm. but the spreading gold to different members.
Yeah.
So what really happens here is the fact that they're opening up the gold to more people more freely, as they're explaining, allows more unique strategies. Because like we were saying early on, with the turrets. With turret plating kind of restricted what the meta was, what the ideal strategy was to laning. Yeah, the optimal strategy. And what spreading the gold out does is allow for more strategies.
Mm-hmm. You can play a late game champion, top lane, and then the early game jungler ganks. You kill them, you get the plate, shares the gold with the jungler.
And so what I see here is sort of or not really evidence, but I feel like this is what we were talking about before with mm-hmm. if we spread the gold of turret plating between the whole team, what it does is it makes it less clear what there's no precise right way to do it, right? There's no giving the gold to a specific person. There you can do
both options are viable.
Yeah, and even more options probably open up here. So what basically this change in 9.1 basically becomes is now we're spreading the gold between more people, and therefore there are more strategies are viable. Right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like we should keep an eye on that as we continue the discussion and kind of I think that splitting the gold between the whole team, it opens up more strategies like that, right? I think I'm repeating myself over and over here. So I mean, let's just go on to the next patch.
So the next patch that the turret plating was changed was actually quite recently, patch 9.23, which is the first patch of preseason for season 10.
Yeah. So exactly 1 year after the turret platings. So turret platings came out, right? They were hotfixed a little bit. Then there was the turret assist update, mm-hmm. and then basically nothing for a year.
Nothing for
an entire year. So
yep.
they were basically the same all of season 9.
Yeah, I think they kind of did a lot of testing there. Like I feel like they could have made some changes intermidst that season, and they didn't want to because they didn't believe they had enough data yet to justify a change that would like really change how turret plating works. Mm-hmm. Like something on the level of turret plating gold now adds to your bounty, or turret plating gold is now shared within your entire team. Something on that level would be
always a preseason change.
It would be a preseason level change.
Because that's going to destabilize the environment so much. And so I totally understand why they wouldn't want to change that in the middle of a season. And we've seen now over this last season, watching playing League, how big of a change turret plating is. I mean, there were a lot of every preseason always has big changes to the game.
Turret plating was definitely the biggest
one.
Yeah,
biggest one for sure. It changed so much of the way the game is played, and it
plays into a lot of competitive strategies as well.
And this sort of shows as well. This whole they changed it, and then they did a couple patches, and they waited an entire year. They really don't. They're very careful about their changes to objectives, because objectives are the crux of the game, right? They're how you win and lose, and turrets are probably the most important of those. If you destroy,
especially now with the turret plating, yeah, for sure.
And if you destroy all the turrets a team has, they've basically lost. Their nexus is open.
You've so much pressure on the map at that point. There's just there's very little they can do to come back. Anyway, let's get into the patch 9.23 turret changes. So, this is where they lowered the plate gold from 160 per plate to 120. And they also increased the resistances. So they made the resistances per plate increase, and they increased those bonus resistances where if you have two champions attacking a turret and one plate's destroyed, it gains additional armor and magic resistance for that second champion, and basically every champion past the first. Those were increased. So they just made the turrets more difficult to kill. And if you want to read what the devs have
big
to
groups.
say.
Yeah, so they this was a very short blurb, which...
Yeah, and there's a very key word in this that I want to point out. Yeah, actually, I'll read this one.
Yeah, go for it.
So the dev said, they're slightly buffing turret plating durability to prevent group and push blowouts in the early game, especially with the Rift Herald changes in mind. Now, I think the key word here is blowouts, which is... acknowledging the positive feedback loop that the turret platings give. So they're definitely aware of how it has shaped the game. And I think this is a step in the right direction for sure.
I mean, for sure. I mean, when preseason came and you told me about the changes that they had made, that was a celebration between me and you. We had a little moment because this is, for all the reasons that we've talked about, this is really important. Sort of decreasing that positive feedback loop. Now you can get Rift Herald twice now, which is a totally different discussion. It makes this a little
the Rift Herald turret plate.
Yeah.
Something,
but I feel like that's a different discussion. But it's there's a little bit of bitter with the sweet. But I think I'm way more on the positive side here.
I like this change a lot.
They are pushing this towards, and I want to see more changes like this. And I really hope, I really hope, and I kind of find it unlikely, but I really hope they continue to push turret plating to be much less advantageous for those early game players.
Yeah. I do like what it does. It obviously allowing the late game champions to farm under tower is good. And helping out the early game champions, giving them an extra gold is also good. But it's just a little bit too much of a positive feedback loop, and hopefully
for the aggressor champion.
For the aggressor. And I hope they make more changes like this soon.
I think and we've already said this before.
Yeah.
I think they were right. I think they were right that they wanted to combine those negative and positive feedback loops. And I think that the aggressive champion should be rewarded now that it's harder, because otherwise it's just a complete boost for late game champions.
Yeah,
and there's a whole other discussion to be had about how the game is becoming more and more focused on shorter game times for a host of different reasons. That's a fairly complex topic, but it's something that they very clearly shown that they're doing. They want game times to be shorter generally. I'm almost certain. I mean, the game.
They definitely do. They've openly spoken about that fact.
But that's that's another day.
Another discussion for another day. So it looks like we're nearing the end. Is there any other notes that you think we missed or you would like to mention?
Well, I mean, I think I'd like to just go over maybe a few more ways of how we personally would fix it, and basically
possible ideas
sort of
for...
sort of decide on the design zone turret change update. What would that look like if Dylan and Rob got in charge of we break into the balancing room for one day. Yeah. We tie up all the devs.
Open the computers.
We're taking control. Yeah.
Open up their engine, make some changes, throw them on the server, and then. But yeah, so let's go over the two that I think we thought of that were pretty good, and that's they give bounties and they get split, like old turret gold between the entire team.
So split between. So we had some options.
So there's those two.
Well, there's also the option of the turret platings never fall off.
Oh yeah, that's the third one.
Because the fall off is so I think we should focus in on exactly the problem that we're trying to fix, as opposed to the solution. So we have those three solutions, but let's try to figure out why do we like those solutions, and what are we trying to minimize?
Yeah. Go for it. When I tried to come up with solutions for this, my number one was decrease the positive feedback loop. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily get the gold that turret plating adds to the economy back into the economy somehow, but just lower the positive feedback loop a little bit. Oh, I would prefer a lot, but that's just my personal opinion. I don't think it has to be that. But just like reduce that massive positive feedback loop that it added in some way, whether it's spreading it so it's not all on one champion. So most specifically, reduce the positive feedback loop on the one champion that's getting the turret plating. Because I think that's the biggest problem. It creates these blowout lanes where, I mean, even if they just get like a lucky kill early game, it results in a couple turret plates, and then they come back to lane and they're ahead, and maybe they kill you again.
And even if it's not the laner, I mean, this was basically, and you've said this before, this was basically an involuntary buff to junglers.
Yeah, it did. It was a huge buff to early game junglers specifically.
Yes,
and a nerf to late game ones.
Yeah, because I mean, junglers are really important. Like I feel like they played a much bigger role in Season 9 than they did in Season 8, and that's that's iffy for me to say because I wasn't playing a bunch in Season 8. But I mean, junglers are just they have so much influence on the map now. Mm-hmm. And they all seem so very powerful.
It was like it was another objective for them to get, you know. Mm-hmm. They already have the biggest priority on Rift, Baron, and the dragons because they have Smite. You know, it's always unsafe to take a dragon or Baron or Rift without your jungler nearby because you don't have Smite. I mean, unless you're Cho'Gath, but that's an exception.
And we can go into again the risk mitigation of these sort of things, where before just like the person who chooses to roam is risking a lot, the jungler who chooses to gank is risking a lot. They're risking XP, gold, just like the laner who's roaming basically.
Well, they're risking it less though, because the jungle minions don't die when you leave the jungle. They're still there. If you leave your lane, those minions will die, and you won't be able to get them back.
That's a fair point.
It's like the same thing as turret plating falling off.
Which I think makes sense.
Yeah.
That's an inherent...
That's their role. That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's the inherent part of League. But whenever they gank, right, they're also risking their life and giving up that gold to the enemy champion. So they risk all of that, but if they succeed, they get a lot. They get, again, pressure in the lane, right? They get gold for helping kill the enemy lane.
Mm-hmm. Okay. They get experience.
And on top of that, they now get
more gold.
They now get turret gold. They get free gold, free real estate,
and
right?
A little bit of free extra added additional bonus gold
on top
of the already.
The host of advantages for that risk that they took, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying you shouldn't be rewarded for taking big risks, but I think that the turret gold rewards that risk much too highly for what they're giving up is.
That, it also lowers the bar for what it takes to succeed because, like I stated at the very beginning, if you remember, even if a jungler fails and the enemy top laner lives, if that top laner even if they just recall. you can still just shove in that lane and get that turret plate.
Mm.
And if you're taking some CS and getting that experience, the enemy, your top laner, is totally okay with that now because he's getting that turret plate gold. And he knows his enemy top laner is losing all this minion gold and experience. Right? So even if you fail that gank and that you don't kill them, obviously if you died, that would be a huge problem. But if you don't, as long as you don't die and you're able to push in the lane, or just let your top laner push in the lane, that's essentially a successful gank now.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So it lowered the bar for what a successful gank needed to be, which buffed early game junglers, and it made the successful ganks even better.
Because before a successful gank, or a full successful gank, you kill the enemy champion, you might kill the turret, or you might get it really close to being destroyed. And that was a problem. That was what they were trying to fix initially. Yeah. But now, like, so back to before, right? No turret platings, partial success. They don't die, but they apply enough pressure that person needs to back. They back off. The enemy laner pokes the tower a little bit, right? Like you said, and I'm understanding what you're saying now. It's they've lowered the bar for what a successful gank is, which is, again, like we were talking about, basically a buff to junglers. They get rewarded because that top laner gets gold for that effectively failed attempt, right?
And obviously this can be done in mid lane and bottom lane as well. We just use top lane as the example just because it's what we're both most familiar with.
Yeah, it's always the one that just pops into mind.
We're both top lane players.
So. Back to the root of the problem that we're trying to solve. You said that the primary thing we're trying to fix is minimizing the initial positive feedback loop, the initial reward to the aggressive player. I originally was disagreeing with you, and I was thinking that the biggest important part was the
permanent loss of
economy
that it introduces.
And I think that you may be right that the important part is the immediate benefit, right? Is decreasing the immediate boost, because that has more influence, I feel. That has more push on the game being more snowbally, right? Than not being able to get that gold back later. It's the fact that they have all the benefits from before as well as a lot of additional gold.
Yeah.
So to not drag the conversation on too much longer, I'll just say that I agree with you there. And let's focus on a way to decrease that initial gold influx that they get. So obviously they've already done a good job here, which is make them harder to kill, make the turrets a bit harder to kill.
Yeah,
and decreasing the gold that you get.
Yeah.
So obviously gold is the real the big thing here.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's
so let's
just brainstorm some ideas.
Let's throw a bunch of stuff on the wall. The simplest and most obvious idea, which is just decrease the gold a little bit more. So hypothetically, if the gold is decreased from 120 to 90, or like 80, let's just do another 40 jump like they did. It might be a little bit of a bigger jump, but if it goes from 120 to 80 gold, that decreases the total gold down to 400, right?
Which is still good, I think.
Yeah.
Because an early game champion can do a lot more with gold early game because that's the thing, is like the late game champion who, even let's say the late game champion somehow just obliterates that early game champion. They get ganked a bunch. They dominate the lane somehow, and they get the gold. It affects them less than the early game champion, that aggressive champion. Like, it's still really a big bonus to have that 400 gold, but it doesn't make them into a champion that's good early game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you can do the math on those number changes as well, because if you look 100, let's say if you get 2 plates on like a first like successful gank kill, right? You got 2 plates before, that was 320 gold. That's a dagger or boots or basically a longsword. right? Like
And
that's another basic item.
You
that
almost
just get for
always
free.
get the first 2 plates.
Yeah, those are the easiest to get because the armor's the smallest amount there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it went down to 120, now that's only 240 gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
You still need to like do good CSing at that point, but like that's still almost an entire another item there. If we put it down to 80 gold, maybe that lets you buy a couple more pots. You get a vision ward or 2. And maybe instead of getting 2 plates, you need to get more than 2 to get that free extra item on your first back, right? Like you don't come back to lane with what you would normally have plus boots or a dagger or a longsword. You come back to lane with what you would normally have plus a vision ward and an extra health pot, right? Like think about how much less that matters in that
So
like quick early game skirmishes.
So here's an idea. So we talked about we like the aggressive player being rewarded, right? But before that only happened once they beat the turret.
Yeah.
It's just that the turret was maybe too easy to kill. I think what might be a good change is basically so we don't have to decrease it so much. I'm not completely opposed to that, but what we could do is instead of everything is decreased by however much gold. What we could do is a sort of thing where we still decrease the gold, but they get more and more gold with each plate. Or my original idea, main thing, is that most of the gold you get is when you destroy the turret, right? It's almost like the amount of gold you get on the turret before.
So you're saying total gold gained, same, but it curves now rather than being a flat line.
Well, I think less than it is now. But let's go back to if we were to implement this differently from the beginning. Basically, you have the turret gold. For simplicity's sake, let's say it's 1,000 gold.
Okay.
And we're saying, okay, well, we want to split this gold up. So you defeat the turret, it's 400 gold.
Okay.
Right? Or it would be, let's say, 600 gold, right? Once you finish the turret, and then it's like 100 gold on each sort of plate.
Okay.
Right, so that adds up to
first 4 plates are 100 each.
Is that? And that is sort of how it works right now, right? I mean, you get a lot more gold in that final plate, or is it?
It's the first turret bonus. That's where it comes from. Yeah, each plate is exactly 120 gold.
Even on the last plate, when
correct? They're all exactly 120.
Really?
Yep. And then if you kill that turret, you still get that turret kill gold, and if it's the first turret, you get even more gold on top of that, which I believe is 150.
Well, no, so my point is that when you defeat that last turret plate, or the last bit of health, when you destroy the turret, you do get more gold than when you just destroyed a turret plate, right? You get turret plate plus turret kill gold.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was checking.
It's literally just turret plates plus the kill gold. Like, you're getting literally just the turret plate plus the kill gold. It's not a bigger number. It's just 2 numbers being added together at the same time. Which results in a bigger number.
Is that how that works?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so what are the implications of this then? 100 gold in each plate, 600 gold at the end. So this
what I think
obviously if it wouldn't be 100 each. Like, let's put it to like a more doable number. So like what turret gold right now gives you
120 per plate,
600 total. So if we just 60.
So it's 600 total when you defeat everything right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this would need to be 340.
So you get 60 per plate, and then once you destroyed the turret, you get a big influx of 340.
Huge chunk.
Yeah. So this is the reason I think that this is good is because this still rewards the aggressive player, but it doesn't.
You know what this does?
What does it do?
This turns it into a full-on objective because of how huge of a spike this last thing would be.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not just 340; it's 340 plus turret gold. So you're gonna get like 600 gold like that from especially if you kill the first turret, right?
Man,
that's
a massive
that's
spike.
huge. That's a lot of gold.
That is a lot of gold.
So that's not only is that gonna really prioritize the losing laner to really defend the turret to their last breath, which might result in them dying a little more times than they need to, but it might also cause the jungler to like essentially just camp to try to get this, like, because you only need to get this on one lane for that to be that big, right? Like that wins you the lane. If you get 600 gold to their laner and they're already kind of ahead, that lane's won.
So what? Okay, so well, I'm not a big fan of that. Then what I'm really looking at here is I'm considering that turret kill gold as part of that. I'm saying that this 340 is the total. This 340 here is like, this is turret kill plus.
Okay, yeah, that would be way more reasonable.
That's what I was trying to say. Because the way I'm thinking is whenever you destroy that last plate, I consider it one big number.
So let's simplify it. Let's just do 460s and then just the 120 at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little more. And then, obviously, it's going to be a bigger number because of the first turret gold, if you get that, and the regular turret destruction gold on top of that. Which is going to result, like, way less than 600 total gold.
Because a huge influx is not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
But basically, what I'm trying to what I'm trying to get here is I want the snowball to be harder to earn, right? I want that extreme snowball potential to not happen so easily. Since it's perfectly evenly split right now, every plate is just as valuable as the next, but it gets harder and harder to get them.
The other thing that this would do is, if you're in a lane that's losing, but you're not losing hard, oftentimes you'll be able to get a first couple of those plates. Even though you'll lose all of yours. Like, they'll get all 5 of the plates, but you'll get, like, 2, maybe 3 of theirs. So this kind of takes a little bit of the gold away from that perspective as well. Because they'll only get the first 360s, first 2 or 360s, and they won't get that big 120 at the end. So they'll only get half instead of, 3/5. Which that might still be fine. Like, that might be an okay trade-off that prevents the blowout section, which is when the turret plating is just a little bit too much.
And because what happens here also is like that destruction. I think that this is more okay because we also have to remember that
it's not all about helping the late game champion.
Well, that's true, but it's also harder and harder every plate you get, right?
That's true.
So we got to think about how it was before turret plating. Is that you only got that reward when you got it, and then you got all the advantages with that, and that kind of screwed over the laner who's there. So, well, yeah. So what we have here is an option for basically increasing the cost of gold. So that the last plate and killing the turret is this big sort of influx. It's harder to earn that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have any more to add on that idea?
Not really, unfortunately.
Well,
we can try to think of perhaps a different idea, because, I think this is an okay solution.
Because if we had,
it's tough to say, honestly.
Because if we had the same amount of gold as right now, like 120, each or whatever, we don't need to decrease it. Let's just think about how the game plays right now, and the same sort of things happen. The jungler comes in and they exploit it. You know what I think this does? Is this lets the defending player have more of an opportunity to defend the turret, truly. because if they what they're doing right now is they get help from the jungler, and they try to blow through that turret, and they get rewarded for every single plate they get. In this methodology of it either getting more and more gold with every plate, or a big thing at the end, a big influx at the end, is that they don't, like I was saying before, they don't get to back, or like you were saying, they don't get to back and get like a Dorn's Blade or something. Like, it's less immediate gold, because what happens is they'll back with that extra gold, get stronger, and then that lets them get more plates. Much less gold on the front end is going to help them much less. It's going to push them to getting additional plates much less than before, right? Which gives the defending player a lot more control in defending. They just got to defend that last plate, right? The offensive player is still getting more rewarded, right? They're still getting more rewards than they would otherwise, and the defending player is getting more time to defend it, right? I like this idea.
Yeah, this is actually, it's actually kind of tough to see what would go wrong here. Because another thing I was thinking of that it kind of solves is one of the things that I've noticed people do. Like, they'll basically suicide for turret plates because it's worth it.
Yeah.
Right?
I've done that a few times.
If you're ahead, you just sit there, you whack down a couple turret plates, maybe 3, and you die, it's totally fine. Even if you're, especially if you're ahead, it's fine. Because not only did you get that turret plating, like another gold, but you reset the opponent's deficit gold. They're now worth a regular kill again. So that's more gold for you to obtain. You're adding to your own economy when you do that.
And that's the thing, is it's like the fact that they disappear is such a big increase in the value. So I think we've talked this idea to death. Like, we have a good idea of how this affects everything. So we have each plate. Let's simplify the idea down to each plate provides more gold as it goes along. So the harder the plate is to kill, the more gold you get.
Makes sense.
And there's a big tap at the end. So you destroy the turret while the turret plating is still on. Bam. Big reward. Because it's so much harder to do, right? It rewards them for that. Alternative idea. We don't do that. We just split the gold between all the members of the team.
Yeah, the gold splitting, it's really tough with the gold splitting, because the gold splitting is a lot harder to analyze because of the implications that it adds to the rest of the map. When it's just one lane, it's simple, right? You know, this player's getting this much gold, they can do this with that much gold. This is how it affects that. But when you're splitting the gold for the entire team, like, there's so much that might go into, like, where the bot lane is at that point and how often that can impact them, as opposed to where, like, the bot lane affecting top lane if they get a turret plate, you know? It reduces the single champion funneling, for sure. That's obvious, like, the main thing that this is targeting.
Which we determined is, like,
one of the big problems, yeah.
Well, we think is just better all around. Like, we don't need funneling gold. That doesn't really need to be a part of the game for the vast majority of players, right? It doesn't need to. It can still be there, and it always will be, because unless we make it so that all kill gold is split evenly, there already is a way to funnel gold. Yeah. Right? So
still definitely a thing.
Yeah, so I mean, if we remove the ability to funnel gold from turrets, it would affect the game a lot, but I don't think it would be for the negative at all. I think that funneling can go from turrets, and the game would be, if not the same, it'd be better off.
Yeah, I really like the idea of spreading the gold the more that I think about it, because one of the biggest I think complaints that I've seen with people in the new season is that one champion that just gets really ahead, and I used Aurelia as an example earlier. But if the turret plating gets split between the team, that would never happen. You would never see super fed champion.
Well, it would never happen, but they would have to do it through kills, which are a lot riskier, because, I mean, okay, turrets fight back, but not the way other champions do.
I mean,
You know?
it would happen way less often.
Yes, exactly.
It still wouldn't have to happen through kills. There can be champions like Master Yi that just power farm for the entire game and then get like 2 or 3 items and then just can run through an enemy team if the right situation happens. But it would just happen less often. It wouldn't happen as often, which I think is the important part of that. And it would also like spreads the gold around, so your team is just like a decent 150 gold up on the enemy team, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that can help you get to your core item, a recall faster, a minute faster. Maybe you get it in time for the dragon, and in many like instances, like over time, that probability will add up, and you'll win more games because of that. And I think that it will reduce the overall positive feedback loop effect from it just by spreading the gold around. Because it's not that difficult to carry with all of that extra gold.
I think it's also important because like if each person gets a smaller amount of gold, it's like the more gold on a single person becomes like exponentially more valuable because they can get entire items, right? They can finish items, but a small amount on everyone is a general benefit. Is a general benefit to the team. It becomes way less of a oomph, right? So I think the final one, so that would be spreading the gold out, right? So we have increasing the reward per plate, we have spreading the gold out, and we have no fall off was our final idea. How would that affect the game? Because I feel like because we had talked about that might open up a big can of worms, the fact that there could be no fall off. The risk with no fall off was that it might even be worse for late game champions than it already is. Because if they can survive the early game onslaught, they still need to defeat those turrets. But on the same end, we've already talked about...
They can get that money.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. We've already talked about that the positive feedback loop for it is more important than the negative. And also, did the turrets get more armor per... As the game goes on?
Yes, up to a certain.
Yeah.
No, they get attack damage. That's the only thing they gain purely based on time right now.
That's kind of what I was thinking. And so over time, I think especially for late game champions, it's going to be easier for them to destroy the plates anyways.
Yeah. Right.
And so we've already talked about, the positive is more strong than the negative.
Yeah.
So I think that it would be okay for the late game champions, because again, it's harder for them to destroy those plates, especially with them fighting through the early game who's gotten the gold. But they get that big gold reward.
The biggest problem that I see with that is that it doesn't at all solve the problem of the immediate positive feedback loop, right? Which is what we wanted to solve. Because it still lets the early game champion go back and just come back to lane with an extra longsword. They still get to do that. And in which case, like think about how many games you've seen where that outer turret is still sitting there at the end of the game, right? Like maybe obviously if it becomes an objective, it might not still be sitting there, but like so often you never even get a chance to take that turret because of how huge the positive feedback loop can become when they get that big influx of gold, which they then kill you more with and turn into even more gold.
Yeah, so I think you're right. And I also think it doesn't solve the problem of, like, so another problem that we talked about it adding is that it restricted gameplay possibilities in a way, because it made the optimum strategy so clear. Right, and we already touched on that. But this doesn't fix that. I feel like it would even lock down the game even more. Like, there's such a clear turning point. It's like, okay, well, once you get to this minute about late game teams turn on, they get a huge gold bonus. They're already better than the early game team because they're late game teams. They get a ton of gold, and they just... Right? So it's like, win within this time frame, lane for this amount of time, and then... I feel like that one's sort of iffy. Let's just toss that one off. Right?
Yeah.
So, increasing the reward per plate and spreading the gold out. Do we feel like... which one do we like better? Do we want to do some sort of combination of the two?
Increase the reward per plate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh! I thought the way that you read that, it just sounded like, plates just give more gold.
No. I'm saying that you get less reward for earlier plates.
Yeah. So plates give more gold as you
destroy
them.
Yeah,
that one. Okay.
Right, which I really like that idea. I also really liked spreading the gold out.
Personally, I'm for the spreading the gold because I think that lets the snowballing become, how do I describe this? Like you're helping your team out literally just by shoving in a turret, right? You get to it might make pushing feel more impactful.
You know what I think? I'm going to throw this out there.
Okay.
I think that we can sort of end this off with both of these as possible changes, but with different criteria, right?
Okay.
So like again, right? We broke into Riot, we tied up all the balancers, and we're in control now. But we also
we need to take control of the place for a couple of days and do some play testing.
And then we need to go to the bosses and we'll be like, hey, we're the new guys. And they're like, you're the people who took over the balancing team? And we're like, yeah.
Took over? No.
No, they just know about it, right? They're just like, you guys took over, right? And we're like, yeah.
Yeah, that's us.
They're
so
like,
here's this idea.
Yeah, and so here's this idea. So we have a couple of ideas that we would, pitch to our producers.
Oh, I like this. This is a good idea.
I love this. We gotta go forward with this. So we need to literally steal their jobs.
Yeah.
Like physically steal the jobs.
That's exactly
bust
what we
in
would
and
be
just
doing.
start working for pay.
Yep.
So I think here's the criteria that I'm at. I believe that spreading the gold is overall a bigger improvement on the way that the game plays.
Mm-hmm.
It is not only a much simpler system and a much simpler change for people to understand, but it has a lot more implications and I think a lot more positive changes to improving a lot of different ways that the game is playing right now. However, I feel like it's a much bigger change than the other option.
That's true.
So I feel like the options are, if we had, no limitations, we could change the game as much as we want. We would make it so that turret plating gold is split between the whole team.
I agree with that.
But if we needed to say, okay, well, let's minimize the changes. Like we want to keep turret plating mostly working as it is.
All we want to do is reduce the positive feedback loop in the simplest and most effective and quickest way.
Yeah, without really changing how it works too much.
We don't want to change the meta a lot. We just want to
adjust it. We want to tweak it. And so I think the way to do that would be making each turret plate give more and more gold as you go along. The total gold's the same, but you need to get to the end to get that big boost of gold.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we've talked about all the reasons why that is. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting conversation. I think turret plating is obviously a huge change to the game, right?
I'm sure there's some stuff that we missed on.
Of course, yeah. I mean, and that's the whole thing with discussing problems in a game this complicated. You're never going to touch everything.
Yeah, there's always going to be something you overlook. But that's what testing is for.
Yeah, and so yeah, I feel fairly confident about our changes here, and
I do as well,
yeah. So Yeah, so this podcast is going to be uploaded to YouTube. If you listen to it and you play League and you have an opinion about what we've said, then post it down in the comments and let us know.
It'd be great to hear your ideas as well on.
And what
if you thought of something we didn't, let us know.
Yeah, we would love to read your input on this discussion. We went over quite a bit on our planned time, but I think we got a lot of talking done.
A lot of good ideas out there.
Obviously, we got
Hopefully
a lot of talking
we touched
done.
on some of the, how do I say this? I don't know. I'm starting to...
We're a little brain dead right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I hope that everybody enjoyed who listened. So, I mean, if you did enjoy, we're going to be doing this podcast weekly. The first several episodes are just going to be uploaded to YouTube, and then we're going to start streaming live on Twitch. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing.
Leave a like.
So come back next week if you enjoyed. See you.
Thanks.